On the crowded streets of New York, a young man from a struggling family raced toward a job interview that could change his life. Along the way, he found a lost briefcase labeled "Confidential" for a major company's meeting. Faced with a choice between opportunity and integrity, he did not hesitate to return the documents, unknowingly helping the company fix a critical mistake. His small act of kindness sparked a twist he never expected, turning rejection into the opportunity of a lifetime. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The sky over New York City was still wrapped in a soft gray mist when Jamal Carter stepped off the subway and tightened the grip on his worn leather portfolio. It was just past 7:30 in the morning. The streets were busy but not yet frantic, filled with the click of heels on concrete and the low hum of engines. Jamal adjusted his second-hand navy blue blazer and took a deep breath that misted in the crisp air. He could feel his heart pushing faster against his ribs. This was it. Today could be the day his life changed. He had been preparing for this interview for weeks. Whitestone Corporation, one of the top finance firms in the city, had an open position for a junior analyst. It was the break he had been waiting for, the kind of opportunity he knew did not come often for someone like him. Not when you came from South Bronx, not when your resume came from a community college instead of a private Ivy League school. As Jamal walked briskly along the sidewalk, dodging puddles and hurried pedestrians, something caught the corner of his eye. Near the entrance of a small coffee shop, tucked beside a rusted trash can, lay a brown leather satchel. It looked expensive, the kind of thing a lawyer or an executive might carry. Jamal slowed his steps. He glanced around. Nobody nearby seemed to notice it. He hesitated for a moment. Maybe he should just keep walking. He was already nervous about being early enough for the interview, wanting to leave a good impression. But something about the bag pulled at him. It felt wrong to leave it there. He crouched down and carefully picked it up. The bag was heavier than it looked. Slipped into a clear plastic sleeve on the front was a label, neatly typed. Confidential, board meeting, 9:00 a.m. Jamal's eyebrows knit together. 9 o'clock. That was only an hour and a half from now. His palms grew a little clammy as he unzipped the bag just enough to peek inside. A thick stack of papers with the Whitestone Corporation logo stared back at him. He recognized it immediately. His stomach tightened. This was not some random lost property. This was important, critical. Jamal stood frozen for a beat, looking up and down the street. The city moved around him, indifferent. Somewhere, someone was probably panicking over losing these documents, maybe even someone at the company he was heading to for his interview. He glanced at his battered watch. 7:45. If he went straight to Whitestone's address to return the bag, he would be cutting it dangerously close, maybe too close. A flicker of frustration flared inside him. Why now? Why him? He needed that interview. He needed to be seen for once, to prove that he was more than the assumptions people made when they saw his face or read his zip code. Whitestone Corporation's headquarters was only 5 blocks away, towering above the surrounding buildings like a monument to success. Jamal moved quickly through the morning crowd, weaving past vendors setting up carts and office workers sipping their coffee. The satchel felt heavier with every step, not just because of its weight, but because of the decision pressing against his mind. At the corner of Lexington Avenue, he paused under the awning of a newsstand. His breath formed small clouds in the cool air as he checked his watch again. 7:55. If he went straight to the Whitestone building to return the bag, there was no telling how much time he would lose, and if he missed his interview window, would he get another chance? Probably not. He thought about his mother's face, the way she had smiled at him before he left the apartment that morning, pretending not to be worried, pretending not to see how much of their future she had pinned on this one opportunity. Jamal shifted his weight from foot to foot. His fingers tightened around the strap of the satchel. He imagined someone in that giant glass building realizing they had lost the documents, panicking, maybe even losing their job. Would they even believe him if he showed up out of nowhere with their confidential materials? Would they thank him, or would they look at him with the same suspicion he had grown too used to? He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, feeling his pulse hammering against the side of his neck. A cab honked loudly nearby, jolting him back. He opened his eyes and stared at the white stone logo printed neatly on the label of the satchel. Doing the right thing had always been simple in theory. In practice, it never seemed to reward people like him. Still, something deep inside, something stubborn that had survived years of disappointment, told him what he already knew. You do the right thing because it is right, not because it guarantees anything. Jamal inhaled sharply through his nose, squared his shoulders, and stepped off the curb. His shoes splashed lightly through a shallow puddle as he crossed the street, the satchel still tucked close to his side. He quickened his pace, passing sleek black town cars and glass storefronts, until the Whitestone building loomed up before him. The lobby inside was grand, polished to a mirror shine, flooded with natural light from massive windows. Men and women in sharp suits moved with purpose through security gates and elevators. Jamal hesitated at the revolving doors for half a beat, then pushed inside, heart thudding louder now, not just from nerves, but from the knowledge that he was entering a world where he would likely be judged the moment someone laid eyes on him. At the security desk, a tall man in a gray uniform gave Jamal a quick glance that slid from polite indifference to cautious suspicion. Jamal cleared his throat, forcing a smile he hoped looked confident. He lifted the satchel slightly. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "I found this outside a coffee shop. It has your company's name on it. I thought maybe someone here lost it. It looked important." The guard's eyes narrowed slightly. For a long second he said nothing, just studied Jamal like he was trying to solve a riddle he did not trust. Jamal could feel the weight of the stares from two women nearby, both holding key cards and talking in hushed tones. The guard finally reached for a phone. "Wait here," he said, his voice clipped. Jamal nodded once, his jaw tightening as he stepped back from the desk. He stood there, feeling the distance grow between him and everyone else in the lobby. He could almost hear the unspoken questions hanging in the air. What was he doing here? Why did he have that bag? Could he be trusted? The seconds dragged out longer than they should have. Jamal forced himself to breathe evenly, to keep his head high. He had done the right thing. That was what mattered, even if nobody else seemed to see it yet. Just then, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby slid open. A man in his early 50s, silver-haired but fit, stormed out with a frantic energy that seemed to ripple through the air. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie askew. His face, flushed and anxious, swept across the room like a searchlight. Jamal's instincts kicked in. Somehow he just knew. Before the security guard could react, Jamal stepped forward, holding up the satchel. "Sir," he called out, voice firm but respectful, "is this what you're looking for?" The man's head snapped toward him. For a brief moment there was pure raw desperation in his eyes. Then he saw the satchel. His entire body seemed to sag with relief. "Where did you find this?" the man asked, striding over quickly. His voice was sharp but not unkind. Jamal explained, keeping it simple, factual. He told him about the coffee shop, about seeing the label, about wanting to make sure it got back to the right hands. The man listened intently, nodding, his breathing still uneven. "You have no idea how important this is," the man muttered, almost to himself. He looked back at Jamal, this time with something different in his eyes. Gratitude. And something else. Curiosity. "Thank you," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a checkbook. Jamal shook his head immediately, taking a small step back. "No, sir." "I didn't do it for a reward." The man's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if this response was rarer than the lost satchel itself. Before he could press the matter, Jamal spoke again, voice cautious but sincere. "I noticed there was a small typo on the front page. It might be worth double-checking before your meeting." The man blinked once, sharply, as if a new realization was dawning on him. His eyes sharpened. Jamal nodded once, offered a polite smile, and turned to leave without waiting for anything more. Behind him, the man clutched the satchel tighter against his chest, watching Jamal disappear through the revolving doors into the rising light of the city. When Jamal pushed open the door to his apartment later that afternoon, he felt every ounce of the day's weight settle onto his shoulders. The interview after returning the satchel had been nothing short of a disaster. The hiring manager, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perfunctory smile, had barely looked up from Jamal's resume. The questions were cold, mechanical, as if Jamal's answers had been decided before he even spoke. No interest, no real conversation. By the time he walked out of the building, Jamal knew. They were not going to hire him. He could feel it in the way the interviewer's handshake was limp, in the way he said, "We'll be in touch," without meeting Jamal's eyes. The bus ride home was a blur. Jamal sat pressed against the window, watching the city streak past in a haze of gray and blue. His reflection stared back at him, tired, but still upright, still breathing. Jamal dropped his portfolio onto the worn coffee table with a dull thud and sank into the sagging couch that had been in their living room longer than he could remember. The apartment was small, 2 cramped bedrooms, 1 narrow hallway, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people standing side by side. The walls were clean but faded, the carpets threadbare from years of use. Every surface told a story of sacrifice, of stretching every dollar just a little further. His mother, Angela Carter, had worked double shifts at the hospital for most of his childhood, first as a cleaner, later as a patient aide when she had finally earned her certification at night school. She had taught him early that dignity did not come from what you had, but from how you carried yourself when no one else was looking. Jamal had taken those lessons to heart, studying late into the night at the kitchen table, ignoring the noise of the neighborhood outside their cracked windows, pushing through the sneers of counselors who thought community college was the only path for kids like him. They had never had much, but they had pride and hope, even if it was a fragile thing some days. That hope was what had kept him going when the scholarships fell through, when the unpaid internships went to someone else's nephew, when the "we'll be in touch" emails never came. He ran a hand over his face now, feeling the roughness of a beard he had not had time to shave that morning, the fatigue pulling at the corners of his eyes. There was no fallback plan, no trust fund waiting. It was just him, and the promise he had made to himself and to his mother, that he would find a way, that he would not let the world decide who he was allowed to become. As he sat there, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, Jamal felt the weight of it all pressing down. But underneath the disappointment, buried deep, there was still something else, something stubborn and burning and quiet. He had not broken yet, and he would not start now. Inside the apartment, the air was heavy and still. His mother's voice called from the kitchen. "How did it go, baby?" Jamal hesitated, then forced his voice steady. "It went fine, Ma," he said, setting his portfolio on the cracked coffee table. He did not have the heart to tell her the truth, not yet. That night, Jamal lay awake staring at the ceiling, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. Doubt gnawed at him. Maybe he had made a mistake returning that satchel. Maybe in a city like this, doing the right thing just made you easier to overlook. He thought about the man in the lobby. The look of relief when he had handed over the bag. The surprise when Jamal pointed out the mistake. That memory stayed with him, small but stubborn. A reminder that he had not imagined it. Someone had seen him. Even if it had not changed anything. He drifted into a restless sleep sometime after midnight, not with hope, but with quiet resignation. The next morning, the knock on the door jolted him awake. It was still early, light barely filtering through the blinds. His mother opened the door just as Jamal sat up on the couch. "Phone call for you," she said, handing him the cordless phone with a curious look. Jamal rubbed the sleep from his eyes and pressed the phone to his ear. A crisp voice answered. "Mr. Carter, this is Lisa from Whitestone Corporation. Mr. Whitestone himself asked me to reach out to you. He would like to schedule a meeting with you this morning, if you are available." Jamal blinked hard, wondering if he was still dreaming. "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly, the words catching slightly in his dry throat. "Yes, I'm available." The woman gave him the address and time. 9 o'clock sharp, no lengthy application, no screening, a direct invitation. As Jamal hung up the phone, he caught his mother's eye across the room. For the first time in a long time, he let a genuine smile break across his face. He straightened his back, smoothed his jacket, and knew one thing for sure. This was not luck. This was the result of every choice he had made when nobody was watching. Today he would walk back into that city, head high. Today he would be ready. Jamal's first day at Whitestone began before the sun had fully risen. He stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his freshly laundered shirt, smoothing down the fabric with hands that trembled slightly from a cocktail of excitement and nerves. He could hear his mother in the kitchen humming low under her breath, the familiar clatter of dishes grounding him as he took one last look at himself. No matter what happened today, he had earned his place. That thought alone steadied him as he stepped out the door and into the brisk morning air. The lobby of Whitestone buzzed with a different kind of energy during the workday. Men and women moved briskly through the space, badges flashing, coffee in hand, eyes sharp with purpose. Jamal crossed the marble floor toward the elevator bank, his footsteps measured, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. On the 42nd floor, he was met by a woman named Claire, a senior analyst who had been assigned to show him the ropes. Claire had an efficient way of speaking, her sentences clipped short as if time was a luxury she could not afford. She handed him a thick binder labeled Orientation and a slim laptop, then walked him through a dizzying maze of cubicles and glass-walled meeting rooms. "This is not school," Claire said without looking at him. "You are expected to keep up without being handheld." Jamal nodded once, absorbing her words without flinching. He knew how this worked. He had seen it in every job he had ever taken. People looked at him and made their judgments quickly, silently, believing they knew his limits before he opened his mouth. That was fine. He was not here for their approval. He was here to work. His desk was tucked into a corner near the trading floor, a modest space with a good view of the controlled chaos unfolding beyond the glass. Screens blinked with graphs and numbers he recognized from textbooks, but had rarely seen moving in real time. Claire left him with a curt "good luck" before disappearing into a meeting. Jamal sat down, opened the binder, and started reading. He worked methodically, taking notes, cross-referencing company procedures with market trends he had memorized over months of late-night study. Time blurred. At some point, someone dropped a folder onto his desk without a word. Inside were raw data sheets for a project analysis due by the end of the day. No instructions, no guidance. Jamal set his jaw and got to work. Hours passed in a whirl of numbers, graphs, and calculations. His eyes burned from staring at the screen. His neck ached from bending over spreadsheets, but he refused to slow down. He double-checked every figure, cross-validated every assumption. He knew there would be no room for mistakes. Not for someone like him. By 5 o'clock, he stapled the final report together and walked it over to Claire's desk. She glanced up, her expression skeptical, but she took the folder from him without comment. As Jamal returned to his seat, he caught a few sidelong glances from nearby co-workers, some curious, some dismissive. It did not matter. Let them look. Let them wonder. He stayed at his desk even as others began gathering their things, packing up laptops and laughing about evening plans. He reviewed his notes again, preparing himself for tomorrow. He had no intention of giving them a reason to doubt him. At 6:30, as he finally gathered his things, Jamal glanced once more out the window. The city sprawled out below him, lights beginning to flicker on one by one like stars emerging against the dusk. He pressed a hand lightly against his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart beneath his palm. He belonged here, not because anyone had given him a chance out of pity, not because of charity. He was here because he had chosen to do the right thing when nobody was looking, and now he would prove day after day that he deserved every inch of ground he had claimed. Jamal walked to the elevator with slow, deliberate steps, feeling the weight of the day settle into his bones, but also something else. A quiet, growing strength that no rejection, no assumption could take from him. The days at Whitestone turned into weeks. Jamal kept his head down, his focus sharp, his work meticulous. He volunteered for projects others passed over, stayed late to triple-check his numbers, asked questions when others assumed he would stay silent. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. Claire, who had barely concealed her skepticism during his first week, started forwarding him complex assignments without the cold, warning glances. Some colleagues began stopping by his desk with casual questions, seeking his insights under the pretense of friendly conversation. Jamal answered with quiet confidence, never arrogant, never eager to prove himself with words. His work spoke louder than anything he could have said. 3 months after he had first walked into the building, carrying someone else's satchel, Jamal was called into a meeting with the senior project leads. It was a Friday morning, and the air in the conference room was taut with the buzz of an important deal. Richard Whitestone himself stood at the head of the table, surrounded by charts and proposals. His presence commanded the room effortlessly, but when his eyes found Jamal, there was a flicker of something else. Recognition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice steady, "we have an opportunity on the Horizon merger that could redefine our future. We need sharp eyes and steady hands on this. We cannot afford mistakes." There was a murmur of agreement around the table. Richard's gaze swept the room, then settled once more on Jamal. "I want Jamal Carter on the lead analysis team," Richard said simply. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. A few surprised glances were exchanged. One man shifted awkwardly in his seat. Claire, seated 2 chairs down, gave the smallest of nods, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Jamal felt his chest tighten, but he kept his expression calm, professional. He gave a single, respectful nod. "Yes, sir," he said. The meeting moved on, but Jamal knew, in that moment, something fundamental had shifted. He was not just tolerated, he was trusted. The following weeks were a blur of long nights, strategic calls, and endless spreadsheets. But Jamal thrived under the pressure. His attention to detail caught discrepancies that others missed. His insights during strategy sessions pushed the team towards smarter decisions. Slowly, the merger proposal strengthened, crystallized, became something undeniable. When the final deal was signed, Whitestone Corporation secured one of the most lucrative expansions in its history. Bonuses were handed out, promotions discussed behind closed doors. But Jamal did not measure his success by the size of a check or the title next to his name. He measured it by the small but growing changes he could see. The way new interns of every background were given real projects instead of being shuffled into invisible corners. The way meetings had begun to have more than just one kind of voice at the table. One evening, long after the office had emptied and the city lights had turned the windows into shimmering walls of gold, Jamal stood by the glass, looking out over the streets he used to walk, searching for opportunity. His reflection stared back at him. Not the kid with the worn portfolio, not the name overlooked at first glance, but a man who had carved his own place in a world that had not been built for him. Behind him, the soft click of the door broke the silence. Jamal turned to see Richard Whitestone leaning casually against the frame, arms folded, watching him. "You made quite an impression, Mr. Carter," Richard said with a small smile. "Not just with the merger, with how you carry yourself." Jamal nodded once, not out of arrogance, but gratitude. He knew better than to believe the road would ever be easy, but he also knew now, beyond any doubt, that it was worth walking. Richard stepped forward, extending a hand once more, just as he had months ago in that sunlit office. "Welcome to the future, Jamal." Jamal shook his hand firmly, feeling the solid weight of the moment settle deep into his chest. He turned back to the window one last time before leaving. The city stretching out before him, endless and shining, a living reminder that sometimes doing the right thing when no one is watching can change everything. And this time, he was ready for it. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.